Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. There's a brand new video from the Temple Institute. At the time that I'm recording this, it came out just 3 hours ago. And there's an update on the red heifers. They also go through and introduce you to the key figures of the Temple Institute and what they're doing to prepare for the Third Temple. If you're not familiar with this organization, it's a private organization based out of Jerusalem. And they've gone ahead and they've recreated all the vessels and instruments and clothing for the priest and for the high priest to prepare for the Third Temple. And they're also working with the red heifers. The red heifers, if you don't know, this is kind of a big deal. So all Jews today are considered ritually impure. And that's a problem when it comes to reinstating temple services in Judaism. So what they need to do is they need to find these ritually pure red heifers, which has been very hard to do. They finally found some. They were shipped in from Texas 2 years ago. And they need to perform this ceremony on the Mount of Olives and get the ashes and then create this solution with some other ingredients that they can use to purify Jews that ascend up to the Temple Mount. Okay, so this is kind of a big deal. In fact, Hamas said that this was one of the reasons that they decided to launch their attack on October 7th. And we've covered that on the channel before. And Hezbollah has also spoken out against the red heifers. I've been keeping track of this very closely. I created a spreadsheet. There were a few different sources that talked about the number of heifers that were brought to Israel and their ages. And it was a little bit unclear, but essentially the red heifers have to be 2 years old. And I've heard like different things like 2 years old in 1 day, 2 years old in 1 month. But the gist of it is that they have to be in their third year. And at this point, I tracked all the different possibilities. And at this point, they should all be of age. As to whether they're still ritually, they meet the standard, which comes down to a number of different things. But one of the trickiest things is the color of their hairs, because they can't, and this is something I don't quite understand either. I think it's that they can't have more than two hairs that aren't red. So yeah, you can't have more. So basically they have to be completely red. And they go through and they check them with a magnifying glass. Like they'll have a rabbi that checks every single hair with a magnifying glass. And so we're in that time frame where it seems that this can happen. And I was of the frame of mind that they would do it as soon as possible because it's been so hard for them to find suitable red heifers, but it hasn't happened yet. And so that's why we're really watching this, because just by them coming to Israel, if that was one of the reasons that the war started, imagine what will happen if they're actually burned and they produce the ashes. It could take things to the next level. It may also excite many Jews and get them enthusiastic about building the Third Temple. So that's why I'm following this. I've also been following the Temple Institute. I have this other spreadsheet. So the first one that we were looking at is the spreadsheet called Judaism, Red Heifers. And then there's this one called Judaism, Temple Preparation, which is in reference to the Third Temple. And this goes back, at least with what I'm tracking, it goes back to 1987 with the establishment of the Temple Institute. And then you have all these different developments. So you can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link for them is in the description box of each video. But with all that being said, all right, so what's the news? Okay, so let's start talking about the red heifers, and I have some other things to talk about too. Okay, so it says, and this is at about the 28-second mark, 2 years ago, 5 red heifers arrived in Israel, each one perfectly red with no black or white hairs. Today, now that the heifers are here, we still have many challenging preparations to make. Okay, so I've discussed this with Rabbi Gerfine. If you're new to the channel, I have this playlist called Special Guests, and you can go through here and find my interviews with Rabbi Gerfine from Jerusalem. By the way, our interviews are going to discontinue. I recently found out that he's no longer working with Israel 365. They're the ones that set me up with Rabbi Gerfine. So unfortunately, we're not going to be talking to him anymore. unless something changes in the future. He said there's a possibility, but so it's been really good getting to know him and learning so much from him about Judaism. He's had incredible insights, and I mean, he's a rabbi, so he knows his stuff when it comes to Judaism. We've learned a lot. He said that they may set me up with a different rabbi, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, I've talked to him about the complications, and he's talked about the fact that there's a lot of discussions going on right now, especially around the subject of the Mount of Olives in the Kidron Valley. And there's basically like purity issues because that whole area is just littered with graves all over the place. And that's an issue because if you can come in contact with a grave, a cemetery, it makes you ritually impure. So there's that among many other things that they're discussing. I've talked to Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. He is a journalist with Israel 365. And if you haven't watched this interview, you really should, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the red heifers, especially among these like evangelical Christian channels. There's a lot of them that just kind of like guess, or they just like fill in the blank and they don't really know what's going on. But Adam is in contact with the Temple Institute. He's like friends with them. And he was able to answer so many questions. So I would encourage you to watch this, but he was discussing some of the things. And by the way, this is Israel 365 right here. I'll put a link for all this in the description box below. I kind of have like a relationship with them, and it's been a good thing. Okay, so many preparations to make. Okay, that's as of today, many preparations to make. Specifically, it says we need to appoint a Cohen who has the proper status of ritual purity. Okay, so you know that in Old Testament times, with the law of Moses, the one tribe that held the priesthood was the tribe of Levi. Okay, so you had the Levites. Within the tribe of Levi, you had the sons of Aaron that served in the office of priest, and that's what a Cohen is. So this person right here is a descendant of Aaron, and he's a priest in Judaism. So I guess they're still looking for this. Now, that's unfortunate because when I was talking to Adam right here, this was 4 months ago, he told me that if we had done this interview a few days before, he would have said, nope, this ceremony is not taking place anytime soon. And the main reason was because they didn't have a Cohen that was in a state of ritual purity to carry out the ceremony. But then, just like a day or two before our interview, something changed. In the Temple Institute posted about this. This was April 3rd of this year. A Cohen fit to perform the red heifer ceremony. A young Cohen in the photo, the young Cohen in the photo visiting the red heifer candidates in Shiloh is fit to perform the red heifer ceremony. He came into the world via home birth, has never set foot in a hospital or cemetery, and therefore considered by halakha, Jewish law, to be of the highest level of Torah purity, having never contracted tumat met, which is impurity imparted by contact with a corpse. Should he opt to participate in the Temple Institute's ongoing preparations in anticipation of the renewal of the ashes of the red heifer, he will undergo intense instruction and training. So this was back in April, but with this video that just came out, makes it seem like maybe he did not opt in. So that we may be back to square one with trying to find a Cohen. But I don't know. Maybe after this video, I'll reach out to Adam and see if he has anything to say about it. But the video says we need to appoint a Cohen who has the proper status of ritual purity. So that's one of the hiccups right now. And then at the 36-second mark, it says we need to find the proper location for the ceremony, which needs to be directly facing the place of the Holy Temple. So we've talked about this before. the ceremony does not take place on the Temple Mount. It takes place on the Mount of Olives in a place that looks directly into the Holy of Holies. In fact, you know what? I should have pulled this up. Yeah, here we go. This is what I was thinking of. So if the temple was in existence today, if it was constructed and you had this bridge that goes from the Mount of Olives to the Temple Mount, this is what it would look like today. And you'll notice that it's not on an altar. That's one thing that a lot of people get wrong. I got this wrong because CBS put out this video where they showed this like big white altar, but it's just a demonstration altar, and it's not for the red heifer. It's just for reenactments of other sacrifices. So basically the red heifer would just be put on top of a pile of logs, sticks, wood, and then it needs to be burnt in sight, like directly within sight of the Holy of Holies over here. Okay. So I'm a little puzzled by this, maybe not, because we had already covered the fact that so on this article, this is CBN, this is like that Christian news network. We already knew that the land had been purchased. Okay. It says here, according to those working on the project, the ceremony of the red heifer needs to be performed on the Mount of Olives and in a place that would have looked directly into where the temple stood. The land directly east of the Temple Mount, purchased 12 years ago, meets both of those standards. Rabbi Yitzhak Mamo owns that land on the Mount of Olives. Mamo is with Uvnei Jerusalem, or Yerushalayim, a group that preserves Israel's history and works to educate future generations. CBS had interviewed Mamo. This is him right here. So he's the one that owns the land. But even though they have the land, there may be debates about precisely where on that land it's supposed to take place. They had this red heifer conference. I think it was in April. It may have been in May. I can't remember. But I think that was some of what they were talking about. So they may not have come to a consensus on exactly where it needs to happen. So maybe that's why they're still waiting on that. Okay, so it sounds like they're still looking for a Cohen who will agree to do this and who is ritually in a state of ritual purity. And then they're still trying to work out exactly where on the Mount of Olives to do it, even though it seems that they've purchased the land. They just maybe don't know where on the land. And then there are, according to Rabbi Gerfein, it seems that there are other issues having to do with Jewish law that are being worked out. So that's why we haven't seen this yet. Another thing that I'm curious about is what impact this will have on the war with Hamas, as well as Iran, because at the time that I'm making this, we're still waiting for this attack from Iran and from Hezbollah and Yemen and others. And I mean, can you imagine what would happen if they successfully carried out this ceremony and got the ashes? This is one of the things that is keeping them back from doing most of the temple services. There are some things that they can do. I've talked about this with Adam and with Rabbi Gerfein. There are some sacrifices that can be done in a state of ritual impurity, but most of what's done, the Kohanim need to be purified by the ashes of the red heifer, as well as any Jews that come to the temple. So if they went through and they were successful, then that would probably exacerbate things. But at the same time, the clock is ticking, because there's always the possibility that some of the hairs of these red heifers could turn into a different color. It's not guaranteed that they'll stay red. So there is a little bit of pressure. And like I said, they've been looking for these red heifers for a long time, and it's been very difficult. So we're in a very interesting time when it comes to the red heifers. So let's go back to let's go back to this video. There were interesting things that they showed. We've already seen scenes like this before, like on Israel 365, but here you have Kohanim. They're doing they do a bunch of like reenactments, but here they are in temple clothing. And I think it's really funny because whenever you come across some of these like anti-church sites, they'll like post things from the temple or temple clothing and basically mock it. And they shouldn't, because that's what you wear, or that's what they wore in ancient times in the temple. They wear temple robes. And so if you go to the temple, and if you're familiar with Judaism, you really shouldn't be surprised at all why you dress the way you do in the temple, because we are a nation of priests. That's what we are as a church. We are Israel. We are a nation of priests. Here's another, maybe a training or something. They have like this like registry of Kohanim that can serve in the temple, and they've been doing this like intensive training. This guy right here, even though he's not dressed up as the high priest, as of right now, he is the one that's designated to become the high priest. His name is Baruch Kohen. So this is like the main guy, kind of. Well, out of the priests, he's kind of like the main one. They're also right now training Levites. Like they're putting together these Levite choirs to sing in the temple. So that's who these are. They also, attend these different like reenactments and they put on performances right now. And then this is an image I hadn't seen before. I presume it was put together by the Temple Institute, but this is what they envision for the third temple. And as you can see, there's no Dome of the Rock. There's no Al-Aqsa Mosque in this rendering of what it would look like. It looks very much what it looked like back in the time of the second temple. You have the main entrance right here on the south side. We've looked at the BYU Virtual New Testament. In fact, let me pull that up. This is a really good resource, by the way. I'll put a link for it in the description box below, but let's go to, you can either like go to like these different points right here and look at the temple. This is BYU's depiction of what it would have looked like at the time of Christ, right? But you can also go, let's see, you can also walk around temple grounds right here and go inside the temple. So this is a really neat thing. I would encourage you to download it. Maybe use it in your like family home evenings or just show your family. But anyway, so they have this rendering of it. And I think it's interesting. They have like these like sky trams right here. Like that would be really neat to view the temple that way. So this is new to me. I've already seen this. They have this toward the end of the video. There's like a separate video that they had put together. This is on the Temple Institute's YouTube channel, where like you have these teenagers that are like playing. They're playing soccer and stuff, and then they come and get this old man, and they're like, "Hey, look at this!" And they point to the construction of the third temple, and it's interesting. I like it. It has a special feel to it. I personally feel like it has a special feel to it. They also have this video. We've looked at this before. This is another kind of like rendering of what they plan for the third temple. And I wish I could like access this the same way that I can the BYU Virtual New Testament. But it's interesting because they take you inside the ulam, which is like right inside the entrance, and you have like the spiral staircase and other stuff. We've talked about how this part of the temple is similar to the Kirtland Temple. When you first go into the Kirtland Temple, you have this like narrow, what's called the outer court, and it basically corresponds to the ulam of Solomon's temple and the second temple. Anyway, there's more I could say about that, but we've already talked about it before. But you might want to watch this video too. I'll put a link for it in the description box below. Okay. And then I also just want to talk about, like, does any of this even matter? The Jews, they don't have the priesthood. And recently, this is something that for some reason, there's been confusion about this, which there really shouldn't be if you have just like a rudimentary understanding of the gospel and the restoration. The priesthood had to be restored. That's why John the Baptist and Peter, James, and John came to restore the priesthood, because otherwise the Lord would have been like, speaking to Joseph Smith, I need you to travel to New York. I don't know if there were any Jews really in New York at that time. I need you to travel to to Palestine, and there's a person that I prepared that's going to, give you the priesthood. That's not how it played out. Let me just remind you really quick, because I think some people, like people in this community that are LDS, they look at this and they're like, oh yeah, the Jews, they're going to build the temple and they have the priesthood authority to do that. And I don't think that that's the case. That's why when it comes to the red heifers, really the only interest that I have is if this somehow makes it so that the Jews move forward with their plans in building the third temple, because that could and probably will affect the rest of the region and initiate the final war, if that's not already what we're in right now, right? From like an LDS doctrinal point of view, I don't see this as necessary for the Jerusalem temple. But if the Jews are going to start to build the temple and that leads to other things, then of course this is a big deal. But just really quick, this is from Elder Orson Pratt of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He talks about the fact that the priesthood was not on the earth. It has been in the heavens all the time. And then he says, consequently, there were persons in the heavens who held that priesthood, but no one upon the earth. No one that ever pretended to have it among the Christian denominations, and the Jewish people who pretended to have the Levitical priesthood rejected and do still reject the true Messiah. Consequently, their priesthood is null and without authority, and they could not therefore administer baptism for the remission of sins as John the Baptist did, the forerunner of Christ, who held that priesthood. And then he talks about the fact that that's why it had to come back down and be restored. And the main reason why, in addition to that, the main reason why the priesthood was lost is because those that held priesthood keys were killed. It's not because the temple was destroyed. It's because Peter, James, John, the apostles, all 12, those that held the priesthood keys, they were killed. They were martyred. And in order for me to give somebody the Aaronic priesthood or the Melchizedek priesthood, I can't just do that because I hold the Melchizedek priesthood. I have to be authorized by someone who has keys. So when the key holders are martyred, then there was no one left to authorize the passing on of the priesthood. Okay. So the Jews do not have the priesthood, as far as our church is concerned. They still, they've kept a record of their lineage, especially when it comes to the Kohanim, as well as the Levites. If you find anybody that has the last name Cohen or Cowan or Kohen or Cochran or things like that, it very well could be that person is descended from Aaron. And then if you meet somebody that has the last name Levi or Halevi or, things like that, then it's probably somebody from the tribe of Levi, if they're Jewish. So anyway, so we have to understand that. And then we also have to think about this. So Bruce R. McConkie says, talking about the temple in Jerusalem, who shall build this temple? The Lord himself shall do it by the hands of his servants, the prophets. And then later he says, there is only one people who know how to build temples and what to do in them when they are completed. That people is the Latter-day Saints. The temple in Jerusalem will not be built by Jews who have assembled there for political purposes as at present. And then he later on says, the temple in Jerusalem will be built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They that are afar off, they that have come from an American Zion, they who have a temple in Salt Lake City will come to Jerusalem to build there another holy house in the Jerusalem portion of the mountain of the Lord's house. And I go with that point of view. If I had to pick one, I would go with that because it's the most recent statement. The Lord reveals things to his prophet and apostles line upon line, precept upon precept. Although when you go back in the past, you have a couple statements like the one that I'm thinking about specifically is from President John Taylor. At the time, he was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He was talking to one of the Rothschilds, and he said to him, let's see. So I can't remember his name. It's in here somewhere. I'm not Baron Rothschild, a Jew. So he was talking to John Taylor, and they were talking about the temple in Salt Lake, the Salt Lake Temple. Okay, so Rothschild says, well then, this is not our temple, referring to the Salt Lake Temple. And then John Taylor says, no, but you will build a temple for the Lord has shown us, among other things, that you Jews have quite a role to perform in the latter days, and that all the things spoken by your old prophets will be fulfilled, that you'll be gathered to old Jerusalem, and that you will build a temple there. And when you build that temple, and the time has arrived, the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. So John Taylor, who later became president of the church, he was under the impression at this time that it would be the Jews that would build it. He's talking to Baron Rothschild, telling him that his people would do it. But later on, Bruce R. McConkie says that it'd be the church. And ultimately, I'm just going to wait and see. I'm okay with having uncertainty. However, it makes more sense to me that it would be the church that builds the temple. And I don't think that it would be, at least at first, it wouldn't be on the Temple Mount. Okay, you can have multiple temples in a city. And we've talked about the BYU Jerusalem Center. And again, I have to do all the disclaimers. It doesn't matter if a BYU professor said that this was not built to be a temple, or if anybody else said it was not meant to be a temple when it was built. I have a spreadsheet. Let me pull it up. I have a spreadsheet. Let's see. I think I have it under temples. Repurposed, renovated, multi-purpose. This is a list of temples that were not, the buildings were originally not built to be a temple. So you have, let's see, the first one is the Hong Kong China Temple. You have the Vernal, Utah Temple, which used to be the Uinta Stake Tabernacle. The Copenhagen, Denmark Temple was the Prior Veg Chapel. The Manhattan, New York Temple was a multi-purpose stake center. And then you have what's going on. This doesn't really fit with what we're talking about. The upcoming Brussels, Belgium Temple was a commercial building. You also have, right here. You have the Provo City Center Temple, which was the Provo Tabernacle. So it doesn't have to have been built specifically to be a temple. Any building can be renovated to become a temple. Additionally, there are different types of temples. Like when we think about temples nowadays, we think about temples with celestial rooms and sealing rooms and ordinance rooms and a baptistry and stuff like that. But guess what? The Kirtland Temple was not that type of temple. And the temples for the 24 temple complex of New Jerusalem that Joseph Smith planned out, they were not the type of temples that we have today. There are going to be 12 temples on the east that were for the Aaronic priesthood, 12 temples on the western block that would have been for the Melchizedek priesthood, and they would have been multi-purpose temples. So the BYU Jerusalem Center could very well be like an administrative temple. We've talked about the church administration building. Essentially, the plan for Kirtland, Ohio, in fact, let's pull this up. Kirtland City Plat, Joseph Smith Papers. The original plan for Kirtland, Ohio, is you were going to have 3 temples. Okay. One would be like the house of the Lord, which would be this one on the north side. The next one would be the house for the presidency, which is essentially today the church administration building. The church administration building is not a temple, but in Kirtland, it seems like it was essentially going to be like a temple. And then you would have had the printing house right here. Excuse me. Zion City Plat. Let's go to the revised city plat. It seems that this is still the plan today because this is what was consulted when they built the Independence Visitor Center, which is designed to be one of these temples. These are 24 temples, multi-purpose, and they would go according to different offices of the priesthood. These 3 would be for the deacons, teachers, priests, the presidency of the Aaronic priesthood for this right here. Okay. So in Jerusalem, which will be one of the world capitals, in addition to New Jerusalem, you'll have 2 world capitals. It would make sense that maybe it would match in some way New Jerusalem, that it would have multiple temples and multi-purpose temples. So that's why I think the BYU Jerusalem Center fulfills that. It's currently being used as like a campus for BYU for the Near Eastern Studies program, but it could turn into a temple like this, and it could be like a headquarters temple for Christ when he comes. So I'm not holding my breath on the Jews being able to get the ashes for the red heifer. If that's how it plays out, then fine. That's fine. Whatever happens, happens. It's just, I feel like it's probably the BYU Jerusalem Center, but we'll wait and see. Okay. So that's all that I have for this one. Oh yeah, one more thing. I'm getting a little bit more serious now with my X account. I just got the blue check mark. Basically all you do is you pay for a premium account, and then you do have to pass a few things, like they have to make sure you're not like a sketchy account or something like that. But whatever the case, I have my blue check mark, and now I'm taking this serious. So if you're on X, consider following me. I'll put a link for this in the description box below. I also have my Facebook account as well as Instagram. I'm not as prolific with Instagram, but yeah, if you're on these platforms, feel free to follow me and for additional channel content. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.